And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the day off. He'll be back with us on Monday. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the author of They're Not Listening, How the Elites Created the National Populist Revolution, available online at Amazon.com. Ryan Girdusky, welcome. Ryan, are you there?
Yeah, sir.
That's okay. We got you loud and clear
that.
now. That's okay.
Yes, I clicked the mute button by accident. Sorry about that.
You put the phone on mute if you're in the drive-through window or you're going through TSA at the airport.
Exactly. Sorry. I'm doing neither now. I'm completely here with you.
So you're saying you're in the bathroom?
Yes. No, I'm not. I'm just joking, yes.
All right. Well, let's get to that tense meeting at the White House today between Ukrainian President Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President Vance. It was certainly it was impossible to take your eyes off the television as they started yelling at each other and really going at it. If you're Zelensky, what is the purpose of flying to the White House, having that meeting, and having those images go out? Because the one thing that you have going for you if you're Zelensky and you're trying to get the globe to get behind you is sympathy. And if you look like a sympathetic figure, then you're more likely to get more of what you want, even if you don't necessarily win the argument of the day. But if he thought that this advanced the sympathy for him in Ukraine, either here or abroad, I think he's got another thing coming.
Well, he got a lot of sympathy in the room with the senators. I mean, the senators couldn't wait to meet with him. And it's very funny seeing Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina in the room, and then after and before the explosion, where he couldn't, smile harder being with him, and you had Senator Klobuchar and all the rest of them, and then after the explosion, Lindsey Graham is calling on Zelensky, to apologize to Trump and to America. It was very, very interesting how often Republican politicians are now getting their cues straight from Trump because they don't want to cross him. I think that it just went off the rails for him. I don't think that he expected it to be like that. I have to tell you, when J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, sat there and said, you campaigned for Kamala in Pennsylvania, I gasped. I was like, that I cannot believe he called him out for that. Not saying it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. But it's so, if you go to Washington, D.C., when I've been to Washington, D.C. so many times in these meetings when I talk about Zelensky, they think of him as the modern-day Winston Churchill. Like, it is so absurd how much they gravitate towards him and they bring him up as this hero in their mind. I just don't think he even expected it. And if you go to Europe, it's even worse with how the Europeans, it's a standing ovation in every room he goes to. I just don't think he thought it would be that hostile. I really don't. And, I think that it might be a little bit easier than what it was, but it went south real quickly.
He's supposed to be going on with Bret Baier on Fox News at the top of the hour. I guess Bret Baier thought that he might cancel after the debacle earlier today, but he says he's going to go through with it. What do you think we're going to see tonight?
Obviously they're going to bring up the entire thing, and they're going to talk about the meeting that Trump's people, Secretary Rubio, and the Russian Secretary have had in Saudi Arabia, and the idea of peace. Like, that's going to be questioned. What's going on also is in Ukraine. As much as American neoconservatives, have been pushing, and European neoconservatives have been pushing to continue this war, there's a lot of people in Ukraine, within the Ukrainian government, who are Ukrainian politicians, who are saying, like, we got to wrap this up. We have to end this war. Like, give up the two provinces that Russia has clearly taken over at this point. We're not taking Crimea back. That's completely over with. But the population downfall in Ukraine is so immense. The birth rate is less than one child per woman. There's so few people between the ages of 18 and 34 left in the country, let alone fought for the war, but who just fled. We are witnessing in Ukraine the greatest population collapse in Western history in our lifetimes. There will not be a Ukraine, even if they have their borders, because their people will just have either aged out and died, or fought and died in this war, or left and moved to another country in Europe. it's extremely in a situation like no other nation has been before. So while there's a lot of push to continue this war because they want to see dead Russians, which is what they explicitly said, in Ukraine itself, there's a lot of people who are silently saying we need to end this war. And I think right now a lot of what he depends on what he says to Brett Baer will be, we're going to work with the American government on bringing this over, or we're going to fight without them and hope that Europe somehow is going to continue the war. The idea that Europe is going to continue the war at this point, they spend more money on Russian gasoline than they give to Ukraine in aid. I mean, half of Southern Europe is completely bankrupt. They're still trying to pull themselves out of the 2013 crisis. And there's no fight left in them, and they're an aging population. What are they going to do? Send their Syrians and Iraqi refugees to go fight for them? They're busy joining ISIS. So it's not going to happen. Europe cannot continue this war on, to replace the United States. We are the titular, entity in this entire situation, and without us, it's just over. Like it's over, and it's like kind of hard accepting it. And if he's like a Churchillian figure, remember Churchill was kicked out of office the year after World War II. The British voted him out of office. So maybe we're going to see the end of Zelensky's time in power.
Go back to the point you just made about Europe not being willing to fight for itself, because the subtext of everything going on right now is not even necessarily Ukraine, although they say it's about Ukraine. But if Putin takes Ukraine, let's just say that he's successful, then next on the list will be Poland, the Baltics, and Finland. And I think the assumption is, even for people who are politically not aligned with people like you and me, there's zero chance any of those countries are going to defend themselves. It's going to be up to NATO. It's going to be up to the United States. We're going to be dragged into some massive international conflict because they just simply don't have the desire to put up any kind of self-defense.
Well, first of all, think of it like this. The first part, Poland, right? Let's say the largest country in all this, of all the Eastern European countries, which is Poland, of the ones you mentioned in NATO. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia are very tiny. Poland has lost a huge chunk of their fighting age male population since they joined the EU because they moved to the UK to go work in their, they were for lack of better terms, they were our Latin Americans who came to do working class jobs over the last 20 years. They have a huge problem where the population of these countries is so old, they're well above middle age. So where do they get these troops to fight? We have these international agreements, which is just basically the United States will come and defend you. I think the United States would defend Poland because they have been a very good and close ally for the United States for generations, and they were their own country of their own. They have long history in European history, unlike Ukraine, which doesn't. And they have been a fairly non-corrupt country when you compare them to the rest of Europe. But I think that, or rest of Eastern Europe rather. I think that, but I think it's also a fantasy. I don't think he's going to go to Poland or Lithuania or Estonia or Latvia. But the thing is this: Europe, the whole European Union project has been this idea of an overly gluttonous, lazy society of people who don't have children, which is a major point of continuing for the next generation. They're on this Green New Deal nonsense where they don't produce any energy. They're completely they have no innovation whatsoever. The only company that they have is like Louis Vuitton and Ozempic. They don't make anything of the world. They're living on the welfare state that is only capable of doing it because the American military, American innovation, American, everything has kept the neoliberal post-World War II order that they enjoy immensely afloat. It is only because of America. And Donald Trump is not wrong when he sits there and says they take advantage of us. They absolutely do. So, if Merz and whoever is the new Keir Starmer and all these Macron are going to puff their chest and say, mighty, mighty Europe, well, they've done the polls. 10% of their populations want to join the military to fight in their wars for their countries let alone the idea of Europe, which is a brand new idea that no one's really signed on to as far as the people go. They're all voting for AFD and Le Pen and UKIP, not UKIP, but the Brexit Party or the Reform Party in the UK. They're changed completely their politics where they're more nationalistic, but nationalistic, not pro-EU. And yeah, they don't like Russia, but they're hooked on Russian gas because they've chased this Green New Deal nonsense. It's a lie. Like the whole entire neoliberal project only exists because of USAID, of the U.S. military, of the U.S. Navy, of all of the U.S. basically pulling the weight for the entire Western world as they, eat croissants, don't breed, don't innovate, and don't do anything. Well, okay, that cannot last. It is unsustainable. It is not 1945 anymore. These countries are not the great empires they once were. More young people who are the descendants of immigrants or immigrants themselves in the UK have joined ISIS than the UK military. Like, wake up and smell the coffee. They thought they were going to bring in the third world former colonies to replace their own people. They have no loyalty to them. They can't stop grooming gangs in their countries. They're going to stop the Russians. Like, have a little bit of self-awareness for the moment. If you're going to be Europe, that can stand up to a regional power, which is all Russia is. It's a regional power, not a global power. If you're going to stand up to a regional power, then stand up, reindustrialize, remilitarize. And I said this on Twitter. If they sit there and say, hey, we're going to draft every man and woman 18 to 29 to join the military to possibly fight Russia, they'll be breeding unless they're pregnant and have children, they'll be breeding like rabbits. So, if that's what you're going to do, then that's what you're going to do. But they have sat there and they have, for 6 and 7 decades, demanded the American people and the American taxpayer stand up for what they will not defend. So give me a freaking break that they're going to somehow defend Ukraine when they can't even get Russian oil because they're chasing a Green New Deal. Give me a break. It's all a lie. Americans have had enough, and we're not putting up the bill anymore.
Is there any evidence at all that says that they're going to do something about their birth rate? And I say that because not only, as you correctly point out, do they have an aging population and they don't have enough people of working age to pay the bills for their aging population, especially in a welfare state, but if you follow what's going on right now with AI and what's going on with research, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry, Oracle just came out and basically said that we're not far away from having essentially a vaccine or a shot that will prevent many forms of cancer that will allow people to live much longer than they're living right now. We have an aging population now. As we continue to find these cures for diseases, and AI is going to be a game changer in so many different ways, you're really going to end up with an aging pop. You're going to end up with people in triple digits. You're going to end up with people living long beyond what we assume that they're going to live to. And I don't see how those societies survive.
Yeah, this is something I'm kind of semi-obsessed with because people have this assumption. People kind of get frozen in the 90s when, every Latin American country, there was, women having 9 children with the statues of Our Lady of Guadalupe everywhere and 1,000,000 crosses. That doesn't exist anywhere in most of the third world outside of the Middle East and Africa anymore. And even in parts of Africa and the Middle East, it doesn't exist anymore. Most of Latin America has very, very few children. Chile actually has fewer children than Japan does now. Most of these people in a lot of these places we don't have a huge youth boom, literally except for sub-Saharan Africa and like Afghanistan, which is not going to, I don't know, the Afghani youth, no offense, I've seen them try to do jumping jacks when Americans military was there, don't have a huge faith that they're going to power the future. So they have tried. These people have tried. These countries have tried over and over again by offering these generous welfare policies. But the thing is that you cannot have a tax policy. You can make a tax policy to make it easier to have kids, but you cannot make a tax policy to want people to have children. When the USSR was in power, what they would do was they would tax you if you didn't have children. I mean, no country has done that yet. What they could sit there and do, it's basically enable it from either tax it that you're not a net contributor, or tie your welfare benefits to the fact if you have kids or not. I mean, I know it sounds very, very harsh, but the minute you have attached your future retirement to, not get to the present instead of to the future. You're paying for elderly people rather than having to have someone to pay for you. I don't know. They hope that these immigrants would do it, but they did a study in the Wall Street Journal did a study that like 3/4 of Afghan refugees and half of the Syrians and Iraqis in Germany don't have jobs still 10 years after getting there. They're all on the welfare program. So they can't import new Germans. They can't import new Swedes. I don't care what they sit there and say. In fact, the Swedes are trying to get rid of the ones that they've just imported. They're going to the only way to do it is to tie it to the welfare state, where if you want welfare one day, you have to have a worker to replace you by having one. And I know it sounds harsh, but it is what it is. Or they're going to have to sit there and get some cultural stuff involved in it. The only country to reverse negative birth rates in the entire world in the last 25 years was the nation of Georgia. And that's only when their patriarch, their version of the Georgian Pope, basically said, I will personally baptize any third child for any family in the entire country. And when that happened, everyone was like, great, let's have a third baby. We can get an Instagram photo with the Pope. I'm not joking. That really did work. That really did work. It had a huge birth explosion after that. But besides that, you have to, there's no end in sight. People will just have less kids as it's less frequent to have kids. Instagram and seeing videos of your friends with children does more to stimulate birth rate than anything the government does. So either sit there and tie it to the welfare state where they say, okay, if you want all this great European welfare, you need to have a worker to replace you, or you I don't know, you can avoid the draft if you have kids. Or you avoid taxes if you have kids. I don't really know. But basically, it's a cultural thing, and Japan's having it, South Korea's having it, India's having it, and China. China loses 1 million people a year now. Italy loses about 250,000 people a year now. And guess what? Latin America is going to be there in 20 years. Most of Africa will hold on for a long time, but by the end of the century, most African countries will not have a birth rate above replacement level. Children are going to be the most valuable resource of the future, because there's nothing in culture basically demanding it, and the welfare state has been divorced from the idea of having them.
We're speaking with Ryan.
Very complicated answer, I know that.
Girdusky, author of the book They're Not Listening, available online at Amazon.com. Let's shift gears here, because a lot of people were predicting that by now Donald Trump and Elon Musk would have had a falling out, that Doge would be no more. Those two would get involved in some sort of measuring contest, and that would be the end of their relationship. But all indications are those two are getting along famously, and Doge is certainly making headlines on a daily basis. Are you surprised that those two are still in their honeymoon phase?
No, because I think that Trump's popularity is still high. I mean, Trump did not have a good week in the press. He had a pretty bad week. Egg prices are up, and stock market's down, and we've had the freaking stupid $1 million Visa card that's not going to go anywhere. All that nonsense. He's had a rough week, but his poll numbers are high, even as Elon's poll numbers are in the toilet. And, they had this promise that Elon's going to spend all this money for the midterm elections. I think that he sits there and sees the utility of Elon and sees the positive press from the Republicans who sit there and say, oh, Elon's so great. And mind you, very few people around Trump have sat there and said, I don't like him. You saw that thing with his entire cabinet. He said, who doesn't like him? I know for a fact that these people have gone to reporters, and their team's gone to reporters saying we don't like Elon. They would not say it publicly, though, because if you shoot the king, you better not miss. And Elon's the king right now, unfortunately. And Elon needs Trump. Elon needs Trump because what he really wants more than anything, and you've heard Mark Cuban now sitting there and talking about this. You've heard reporter Kara Swisher start talking about this. Elon wants an AI company. And the only way he gets to advance an AI company is with all this government data, allegedly, that he's been, that Doge has been taking from different departments. They both have a need for each other. The need hasn't ended. In the midterms, if Democrats take the House and the investigation started blowing open on Doge and Elon and everything, maybe. But I think in a very transactional relationship, I don't know how much they really like each other, but in a very transactional relationship, the transactions are still working. So why not? Why not keep it going?
Is AI really the motivation for Elon Musk? Because I just read the book. The
100%.
going to Mars seems to be his overarching goal. Was my takeaway.
Yeah, but yes, but yeah, I think that that's part of it. He's talked about Mars for years and years and years and years, but he has talked about an AI company a lot recently. And if you look at Oracle and Meta and Alphabet and all these other Silicon Valleys, the X AI is very far behind these other ones. And there is a real need for new data. Everyone thinks that everyone has all the data. China has all your data. It's not true. They're actually all scraping for the same data. There's really, really a need for new data. Well, Elon's going to have access to all the data you could possibly want in the world. And when they fire all these workers, which they're firing hundreds of thousands of workers apparently to save all this money, someone's got to run the government. And I guarantee you, I will make a prediction on your show in 18 months to 2 years' time, Elon's going to propose he's going to have an AI company that he'll want a government contract for to run the government to replace the workers that they've all fired. And I mean, he has talked. Mark Cuban had this thing on Blue Sky, whatever the hell it's called, where he sat there and said Elon wants to be the new deep state. I think he's now talking about this more publicly because I heard it from people around him, and there was a great article in the Washington Post by Jeffrey Stein where Dojo are saying everything we can do will be mechanized. We're going to mechanize the whole government. That's AI. That's what it is. And he's not going to let OpenAI, who he hates, take this contract. He's not going to let Microsoft take it. He's going to propose his own AI company, and he's going to have the data and the systems that he's been copying, where it will be a seamless transition. You won't even notice it happens, but it will be a multi-billion-dollar contract. It will be Elon's companies will be embedded in the federal government forever. There'll be no way of ever getting rid of him because he can't upset, the system and by changing different companies and having any possible glitches. I 100% that's coming. And also, mind you, a lot of Republicans are laughing and like, oh, they still use these old systems and these floppy disks in the federal government. Do you know why? Because it's really, really hard to hack a floppy disk. It's really hard to hack old systems. None of these new guys really know how to do it. I mean, part of this is national security where they say it's inefficiency, but that's part of the reason it's there. I think that that's what the main goal is. I don't think it's Mars, although he needs the government to get to Mars. I think it's the AI, and I think that there's more and more leaks coming in, both out of Doge and former friends of Elon to say it's about AI. I think that's really what Doge is about.
Last question before you go. We've seen Elon Musk and Silicon Valley get behind President Trump in ways that they've never done before with a Republican candidate for president. The state of California right now is a failing state where we have a budget that is constantly in chaos. We have an insurance crisis that's going to make us increasingly uninsurable. Homelessness, crime, fill in the blank, we have the problem. And the Democratic Party has complete control of the state of California. The Republicans have not won a statewide office here since 2006, when Arnold Schwarzenegger did it as governor and Steve Poizner did it as insurance commissioner. If Silicon Valley, which is the state's dominant industry, decides that they're going to do at the state level what they did at the federal level, they could really throw their weight around and they could change the political dynamic of the state and make the state function again. Do you see any evidence on the horizon that they're willing to do that the way the railroads used to in the past?
No, they're transactional. It's a complete transactional relationship. And you know what? If Kamala would have won, Mark Zuckerberg would be going by he, him, pronouns in his bio. I think it's a completely transactional relationship. I don't think they're Republicans. They don't like to be regulated. They don't like to be taxed. So they like that part of Republican stuff, but they're not MAGA at all. They would love to replace every American with an Indian H-1B. And they just they view Trump as being the one in power, so you work with who's in power. But in California, Gavin Newsom's in power, so whoever replaces him, Kamala Harris or whoever will be in power, will be Democrat. It's a lot like in New York State. We have a huge population of Hasidic Jews. Hasidic Jews all vote Republican federally for president and Congress because they love Israel. Locally, they are 100% behind the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party says we're going to give you all these things for your shuls and all these things for your all these benefits for your poor families, everything, and they vote lock, stock, and barrel to keep the Democratic Party in charge, regardless of anti-Semitism. But they vote Republican federally. It's going to be the same thing. It's just a transactional relationship, whatever benefits them in the immediate. They're not ideological. They're completely transactional. They actually probably hate most of MAGA stuff.
Ryan Girdusky, author of They're Not Listening, How the Elites Created the National Populist Revolution. Thanks so much for stopping by. Have a great weekend.
You too, John.
Right now it's time to take a look at the roads. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Talk Radio 790 KABC. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And with the weekend under a half hour away, at least for me, maybe you're at the office and you have to keep going until 5, or maybe you do the late shift and your weekend doesn't start until late tonight. Whatever the case may be, whenever your weekend starts, if you want to continue listening to the show, that's easy to do. All you have to do is subscribe to us on your handy-dandy iPhone or smartphone, and all of the episodes will be downloaded automatically to your phone so you can listen to us whenever and wherever you'd like. Right now, it's time for headlines. Is it time to sell your home? Maybe you want to downsize, maybe you want to move, or maybe you inherited a home that you just don't want to hang on to. Whatever your reason for wanting to sell, call Seller's Advantage. Seller's Advantage has been buying homes for decades. Their seller reviews speak for themselves. They're people who buy from people and will provide custom solutions that work for your needs. They offer and will buy with cash and can close in days. The great part is you don't have to worry about spending money on repairs, preparing your home to be shown, or having people coming in and out. There are no agents, just a great offer and an easy process that will give you peace of mind so you can walk away happy. So if it's time to sell your home, call Seller's Advantage for a free no-obligation offer today at 888-303-AS-IS, 888-303-AS-IS, 888-303-2747, and find them online at sellersadvantage.com. DRE number 1096165. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Talk Radio 790 KABC. Yesterday, we learned that actor Gene Hackman, his wife, and their dog were found dead at their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We were told that no foul play was expected, but all three of them died all at the same time, and there's no explanation as to how it happened, but no foul play is suspected. Okay. Well, we've learned some facts since yesterday. Here is what the New York Post is reporting. They say that the legendary Hollywood actor was dead at least 10 days before maintenance workers found the two-time Oscar winner, his wife, and one of their dogs at their New Mexico home. The last, quote, event recorded on the star's pacemaker was February 17th, and the cops say that was the last day of his life. 10 days they were at that house dead, and no one bothered to check on him? He's 95. No one put a call in. Hey, how you doing, Dad? How's that pacemaker working out? Battery charged? Everything okay? What's going on? No. No one checked on them. And they were there for 10 days. I don't know if the man has any children. I don't know if the man has any grandchildren. I don't know. I'm trying to think, if something were to go wrong at my house, would anyone discover me within 10 days? The gardeners are there a couple of times a week, so maybe they would be able to figure something out. Well, you got the housekeeper, you got the pool guy. Maybe if there was an odor, one of the neighbors would figure it out. But I would like to think that someone would figure it out in less time than 10 days. Especially if the door was open. That was one of the parts of the story that made no sense to me, although I must admit a lot of the story made no sense to me, but the door was open. If you're a gardener and you're there and you see a door open, isn't that something that you investigate? Or you're the pool guy? If you're the maid, you have to come in the house. There was nothing scheduled to be done there. No one showed up to cut their hair. No one showed up to, I don't know, for a scheduled dinner. They're just out there by themselves with no one. Everything okay in there? Why is the door wide open? Maybe they thought they were swingers. I don't know. But 10 days, according to local authorities, Gene Hackman was dead in his house before he was found by maintenance workers. The strange story of the death of Gene Hackman, his wife, and their dog just keeps getting stranger and stranger. Right now it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Talk Radio 790 KABC. The weekend is almost here, and it tastes a whole lot like a pina colada. In that spirit, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy? 790 KABC welcomes Light Up the Blues, benefiting Autism Speaks, featuring Stephen Stills, Neil Young, Billy Idol, Chris Stills, and very special guests to be announced. All of this is going on at the Greek Theater on April the 26th. Tickets are on sale Friday, today, at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, however, if you're caller number 9 at 888-790-5222, that's 888-790-5222, you'll win a pair of tickets to the show. All of this furnished by our friends at Niederlander. Good luck dialing. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. I forgot to add one other wrinkle, one other nugget of information that we learned today about the death of actor Gene Hackman. A number of you yesterday speculated that they could have died from carbon monoxide poisoning, that the sensor in the house the battery could have gone dead, or it could have been non-operational, and there could have been toxic amounts of carbon monoxide in the air that poisoned both Gene, the wife, and the dog. According to reports from the local authorities in New Mexico, they said that both individuals tested negative for carbon monoxide poisoning, which means that was not the cause of death. So the mystery around Gene Hackman and his wife and the dog continues. We'll have more on that as it becomes available. As I mentioned before, after the tense meeting at the White House between Ukrainian President Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, Zelensky, who was supposed to negotiate with the president at the White House, and that was canceled after the tense exchange there at the White House, he is going to go on Fox News today in just a few minutes, in about 4 minutes. He's going to be on the Fox News channel with Bret Baier. There was a lot of speculation as to whether or not he would cancel on that interview, because instead of celebrating an agreement with President Trump, he's going to have to talk about what happened at the White House earlier today. That interview is apparently going to happen. What'll be interesting to see is what kind of tone he takes, because he hasn't left Washington, D.C., as I mentioned. He's still in town. According to reports, the Ukrainians want to come back to the bargaining table, and Trump left for the weekend to Mar-a-Lago. So they're going to have to sit there and think about it for some time before Trump decides if he's going to meet with Zelensky again. Maybe if the two end up meeting next week or at some point in the not-too-distant future, maybe he'll be more open to taking a deal. That deal that had been negotiated by President Trump with the Ukrainians is probably the best deal he's going to get out of President Trump. According to some reports, I saw this today, which I didn't realize at the time, but apparently there was a blow-up that happened between President Biden and Zelensky on the telephone in private. It was right after Biden had agreed to give them a bunch of money, And the moment that they accepted the money, they turned around and asked for more. And apparently they got Grampy Joe on a bad day, and he snapped at Zelensky over the telephone. He believed, I guess, at that moment in time that they were being ungrateful for all of the support the United States was giving to the Ukrainians back then. And certainly that was something that was repeated today, first by the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and then by President Trump at the meeting at the White House. Whether or not they all get together and meet again, time will tell. That's going to do it for us today, but we'll be back or Monday, I guess I should say, Monday at noon for another live and local edition of The John Phillips Show right here on Talk Radio 790 KABC.